Welcome to Tactical Magic, a business strategies podcast for the warrior goddess entrepreneur. Hey everyone, welcome back to Tactical Magic. This is Molly Mandelberg, your host, and I have a good friend and client of mine, Ann Ranson, with me today. With 30 plus years in the rough-and-tumble media world and 2 TED Talks under her belt, Ann Ranson supports powerful, professional women over 50 to play to their strengths, reach beyond their limitations, and leave a legacy for generations to come. For those who are looking for more meaning and a deeper mission while remaining in harmony with the demands of the market and society, Ann guides her clients to a place of bigger purpose, greater success, and irrational growth, both personally and professionally. Ann believes everyone is a unique and important contribution to the earth, and her work is masterful at helping her people to write the script now for the life they desire to live tomorrow. Welcome, Ann.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. I'm happy to have you here.
Well, I'm excited to be here.
So tell us a little bit about your journey of becoming an entrepreneur and how you found your way to it.
Well, so I say it's kind of a God thing. I had been in the radio industry for really all of my adult life. And while living in DC in the radio business, I had started doing some consulting with a company that specializes in the women's market. And so I was, in regular contact with the CEO. And towards the end of my time living in DC, not at the company, but in living in DC, I was about to move back to Dallas. I was on the call with her one day, and she was talking about, some problems she was having. And, we were just talking. And she said, "Oh my God, you are such a good coach. I need to talk to you about doing some coaching with my company." And I said, "Oh, okay, sure." Well, about that same time, a friend of mine who had been coming to some spiritual discussion groups that I had been facilitating told me the same thing. She said, "Oh my God, I'd love for you to coach me." Well, I don't believe in coincidences. And so it's like, okay, God, I guess you're sending me some kind of message. So I got moved back to Dallas and thought I would be continuing in my radio job. And then I guess I would be doing these coaching things on the side. And like so often happens, once you open Pandora's box, you can't fit everything back in. And it was like, I just can't do this job anymore. So I called the president of the company and said, "I can't do this job anymore." Thankfully, she kind of gave me a soft exit and a way to earn some commissions for things I had pending. But I basically just quit my job and said, "Okay, now I'm going to do coaching and consulting." And, this was in 2006. So not great timing from an economy standpoint, but nevertheless, I walked off the cliff. And here I am. I've survived. I've thrived. It has had its ups and downs, but that's been 13 years ago.
Wow, amazing. I love that. It's not the same by any means because I don't come from the corporate world, but it's a very similar, someone just finally telling me, "Listen, Molly, you're good at this. Why don't you do this for a while?" And that's how I ended up doing what I'm doing now. So I love that when the universe is like, "Hey, literally with words and a voice speaking to you, why don't you try this now? We're going to pay you to do it and see how it goes." And then boom, it takes off, or you get pivoted and turned into a new direction. So I love that.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful
Yes, I do too.
thing. Yeah. So you work with professional women over 50, helping them to play to their strengths, reach beyond their limitations, and leave a legacy for generations to come. I know strengths work is important to you. Will you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I became introduced to the book Now Discover Your Strengths when it came out, I think about 10 years ago. It was written by not Lindsey Buckingham, a different, that's a guitarist, Marcus Buckingham and Don Clifton. They also wrote a follow-up book that more people are familiar with called Strengths Finders. So I took the assessment, found out what my strengths were, which are in this order, the top 5 strengths: empathy, connectedness, strategic, maximizer, and relator. And it was so affirming because I've always been a very emotional person. And, but the way people reacted to that was to call me a crybaby, which I didn't necessarily take as a compliment.
Mm-hmm.
And so to see that my number one strength was empathy, it all made sense. And it's like that's a word I can embrace and feel proud about. So I took some certification classes with a company that works with strengths. So now I help other people by putting them through the assessment and then helping them understand their strengths, how to use them, and how to build on the strengths, because we're more productive, we're happier. Please don't make me do something I'm not good at, because the results are just not going to be there.
Right.
So I'm very big on strengths, and I think we should all be working from a position of strength, not from weakness.
What's been the biggest shift for you in recognizing those as your 5 top strengths? And like you said, there was a journey of acknowledging yourself, the things that have been maybe given you shame or made fun of in the past are actually your strongest attributes. Like, how has that impacted your showing up in the world or your way of running your business? Or like, what's that journey been like for you?
Well, I think one thing is it gave me confidence, because I could see empathy as a strength as opposed to a crybaby that I perceived as a weakness. It also helped me understand um, why I feel things so deeply, and that was also very affirming. My second strength is called connectedness, and that is about first a belief that we're connected in some way in a spiritual sense, whether that is universality or whether it's through religion or spirituality. But the other thing that really had an impact on me was my number 3 strength is strategic. And I had already begun doing strategic planning for nonprofits and associations. And I just kind of made all that up. I mean, I studied, of course, and learned and practiced and all of those things. And then to see that that's a natural strength I had was just further affirming. And so when I get into difficult situations and doing strategy with people, I don't second guess myself near as much. Not to say that doesn't ever happen, but I know that is a strength of mine. And so I just dig deep and marshal through. Well, not marshal through, because that sounds
But you
hard.
trust
And
yourself.
yes, thank you. Yes, I trust myself.
Yeah.
So I think, and the other thing, if I can just say this real quickly, is the power of understanding strengths in relationships. So at the time this came out, I think my son was like a senior in high school. So I made him take the test. And of course, he was very excited to do that. But when we got his strengths, his number one strength is adaptability, which is all about dancing in the moment. People with adaptability high up, they don't know that next week even exists. Well, my son and I generally got along pretty well, but when we didn't, it was always because I'm this planner and he's this like, oh, well, yesterday I said I wanted to do it, but now I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I started making up all these stories. Well, he's being disrespectful. He's being, a procrastinator. And none of those things were true. It's just his adaptability at work. So understanding strengths also gives us a language that helps us keep judgment out of our differences.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah.
It gives us a way to keep judgment out of our differences, a language to speak that makes it all make sense. There's so much permission and space in that. I love that.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
it
why
feels
I
good.
still work with strengths. And I mean, my son doesn't live with me. He's graduated from college and all of that. But I remember that when there are those things that we're not on the same page about, usually it's something about that. And I can let it go now
Yeah.
because I don't take it personal.
Right, because it's not about you. It's about how he operates in the world, and you can acknowledge and respect that as being different from how you operate in the world.
Absolutely.
And I imagine that gives you a lot of space with your clients too, to say, okay, here's this thing I want to help you with, this strategy or this plan to put in place. And if you know their strengths, you can frame it in such a way that their natural modus operandi can understand it and pick it apart and make use of it, because you know how to speak their language.
Yes.
It's
So
awesome.
when I'm doing one-on-one coaching, I won't do it without the person doing their strengths, because why would I? I mean, because I know that this is an integral part of who they are, and that I can help them better by understanding, because these are kind of like the operating systems that we
Yeah.
have going on. And so
Yeah.
I can much better help them and say, okay, now let's go over that situation. Now, do you see where your strengths were at play? So I just think it's one of the easiest, most valuable tools that's out there.
I agree that it's really affirming too. I had a friend who was studying them, and so she made me take the test to see. It's easier to learn the strengths when you see how they interlock, like you said, and play into each other in relationships. And she told me, I can't tell you what my five are off the top of my head. I wish I had it somewhere handy. But she told me so much about how we run our businesses differently and how we operate with our clients differently, even though we were running at the time similar businesses, because of how we use our strengths and because those are our innate operating systems. That's how we show up in the world. And it was fascinating to me to recognize that the way I am productive, the way I am, the way I attack life in such a way is because I have certain things. I don't remember if they're strategy or achiever or communications or something like that. But it was really fascinating to look at and see, okay, here's where we have common ground, and here's where both of us don't quite make sense to each other sometimes. And we can acknowledge that it's because of this integral part of ourselves. And there's nothing wrong or bad about that. It's just different than the other person. And
Yes,
it's
exactly.
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah,
So imagine
yeah.
if you were aware of that all the time and looking at who you are in your job or who you are in your business or who you are in your marriage or who you are as a parent, what more depth you would have and awareness you would have in interacting in all those spaces if you were to discover these things about yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in this other training that I took, I describe it kind of as a wraparound training for strength. It then takes the output from Gallup, which is where
That's okay.
all of this lives. Um,
This is
it
a
helps.
live broadcast, everyone.
Yes, it is. And of course, me trying to do two things at once, I'm trying to unplug everything.
Oh,
Okay,
that's okay.
we'll see.
Well, we can crop
Um,
that part out.
okay, good.
So let's go back.
So this wraparound program then takes those strengths and kind of gives you a big picture story. Like the combination of my five strengths turns into a profile that's called Passionista. And so, and these are all regular words that we can understand. I took Myers-Briggs a million years ago. I have no idea what that means. So anyway, I could talk, as you can see, I could talk about strengths for quite a while because I think they're that powerful in our lives.
Yeah, and like you said, there's so many ways out there to quantify ourselves and to archetype ourselves and to, get a map for who we are. But if it's not useful and practical and actually applicable to your life, what good is it? I mean,
Yeah,
how is it useful? The strengths thing obviously has been a huge shift in not just how you run your business, but how you interact with people in your life. And that makes it super useful. And who doesn't want
yeah,
a tool that actually works?
exactly.
Yeah. So
And
what's
it's
your,
easy.
yeah. What's your favorite thing in your business right now? What's your favorite thing to see happen with your clients, or what do you just love about using these tools with your people?
Well, I think it's as I'm kind of bringing all of this together, because I do all this strategy and marketing consulting, and I love that. But my passion is really about working with these women who are like me and who are facing transition. Maybe it's in 5 years, maybe it's in 10 years. And so I've traveled that journey and I understand some of the questions that start coming up as we age. And so I'm particularly interested in working with women who've been in corporate America at the executive level or upper management at least, because what happens, so women have to work twice as hard anyway. And I don't say that with any disrespect to men, it's just that's the reality. In fact, the new McKinsey Women in the Workplace study for 2019 just came out. which is measuring how are women progressing into the C-suite, to the CEO or, chief marketing officer, et cetera. And I mean, the progress is like so tiny. And so to be able to help them understand that from the women's perspective, just from all my women in business studies, but then to take that further, we've got the ageism thing that comes into play once you get to be 50 years old. And I was reading an article recently talking about how people, not just women, men and women, are starting to get little Botox injections when they start getting into their 40s because they're already seeing opportunities slip away. And so what happens is when we put all our value in our title or in our job, and I was there for about 10 or 15 years. I thought I was pretty hot stuff because I did blah, blah, blah. Didn't make, what's the expression, a tinker's dam or whatever that expression is. And so to understand as we come to know ourselves and our true authentic nature, our true strength, and we begin to allow ourselves to be who we came to be, then what job we have or what title can take a lesser role in what's driving the decisions that we're making and in the fears that we allow, ourselves to creep in. And I've come up with this expression. So I have this thing called a critical judge that runs in my head.
You're the only
And
one
I
that
haven't
has
met
that.
anybody yet. Pardon me?
You're the only one that has that.
Well, that's what I was about to say. It's just me, but I've given her a name. Her name is CJ. And so I'm learning to work with CJ because I've had a very active CJ in my life. And I think this is part of how I work with women and helping them is what I now do is when that starts, when all that monkey mind and well, why did you, and you're not enough and da 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 da, I send CJ to the library. It's like, I'm sorry, honey, you cannot stay here. You cannot stay with me because I believe that we have all the answers inside, but we have to sit quietly. We have to listen. We have to explore. And so I've created this process that I call finding peace in everyday life. And part of that is to journey within. So when I first started talking to people about this, they would kind of like back away. This whole idea of sitting quietly and journeying within. And I was puzzled by that because I enjoy that. But then I began to explore, and it's because this is my understanding or what I've learned anyway, that we're afraid of what we're going to hear. Because if I sit quietly, am I going to get the shit beat out of me? Pardon.
No, you're absolutely allowed to share on this show.
Okay, good. So who would want to do that? And so we avoid that. Well, that's why we send CJ to the library. Because if she goes over there, then I can sit quietly and I can listen and I can explore, whether it's just in quiet time or if I have a meditative process or a prompt that I want to consider. So all of these little tools, I think, help us find moments of peace. And I think we're in charge of that. It's not about what's going on out there. Certainly it can be hard to not let all the craziness around us make a difference, have impact.
Yeah, and like you said, we have all the answers within us already. So if we can cultivate a practice of finding that space to have peace or to journey within, that's where the brilliant lightning strike of creativity comes from. That's where the clarity comes from. That's where the insight to take the next step or leap or jump off the edge of a cliff comes from. And it's not from anywhere else. If we stay in the monkey mind and we keep the chatter and the social media feed going on a constant basis, when does that insight have a time to step through? And if we go into that place of quiet and we don't send CJ to the library, then again, where is that insight going to come through? It needs some blank space and some gentle kindness for that stuff to find its way to us. And it's ready to come. It's ready to
Yeah.
come. I just reignited my meditation practice recently after being off the wagon with it for a few months. And so many new ideas, small things. I should write this email. I'm ready to make this contribution to my people. Oh, I wanted to make a video about that. Oh, all these new little light bulbs of I could make that, I could create that, I could show up here, I could do that differently. That may not have come if I didn't start creating that blank space again. So it's a really juicy, creative space that we have access to if we're willing to just shut the hell up and sit there for a moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And I experienced the same thing when in fact, it's gotten almost comical
Yeah.
because it's like I'll shut off everything. And I mean, no more do I sit down, pick up maybe it's an inspirational book. I'll read 2 sentences and I have to grab my notebook.
Yeah.
Because I'm starting to get ideas or thoughts and things that I want to remember. But like you say, if we never sit quietly, we're not going to hear anything.
Right. That channel is willing to be open and floodgates, pouring forth if we allow it to be open. I love that. That's a great reminder. So I also just want to talk about magic a little bit because, well, in 2 ways. One, you and I share this passion for both the strategic, analytical, looking at business and growth and what's possible, while also cultivating a spirituality and a deeper sense of, interconnectedness with the other beings on this planet, but also just something higher and greater that's possible for ourselves. And also, I think because of that commonality, you chose to be part of Magnetic Influencer Collective, which for anyone listening is my 6-month group program, which I lovingly call Magic Magnetic Influencer Collective. And I just love to hear what your experience has been in that and how it maybe has contributed to you, and how you navigate that world between the tactical and the magical.
Well, first of all, I mean, you provide such a rich environment. I think there are 6 other ladies or 7 other ladies that are in the group, all just wonderful, wonderful women that are providing these great, services out into the world. And I think one of the things that there's 2 things I think in particular that I appreciate. One is a very robust workbook. In fact, it is so robust that I seem to constantly be trying to catch up on something. But much better that than it's like, well, you mean this is all there is? And so I appreciate all the time and energy that you put into the workbook and all of the different things. And then you give us freedom to use or not use, as we see appropriate. So I love that aspect, and I love the community part of it. It's kind of interesting though. Now we're starting to get close to the end of the program, and it's like, oh, but we're just getting to know each other really well. It's like, one of those things, which is good from a business standpoint because you always want to leave them wanting more, right? And so, like I had a private conversation with one of the other classmates this week, and it was just so nice, to get to know her a little bit better. And so I think, not how, but the fact that you attract these really cool women, at least it's all women in this particular group, I just think is awesome.
Thank you. And I've been so grateful and joyful to have you as a part of that community. There is something that happens with that group energy, the tribe energy, which we've been harnessing pretty directly in this round of Magnetic Influencer Collective, by doing the Power of 8 practice every single week, which is from a book by Lynn McTaggart, if those of you who are listening haven't heard of that yet. But there's a collective creative consciousness that once we tap into it, it can sort of pull us along to be more proactive about taking action or more tuned into who we want to be. There's something really, I think, generative and juicy about being a part of a group like that. So I'm really grateful to have your expertise and years of experience and just aliveness as part of that group. It's been really yummy to have you along for the ride this time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
It's been fun.
it has
Yeah.
been fun. So what are some ways, or what is the best way for people to get a hold of you if they want to learn more about Ann Ranson?
Well, okay. Well, I unplugged the phone, so I don't know what's ringing. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So the best,
Let's just let it ring and then we'll cut this part out.
oh, it's my printer
That's okay.
that has a fax in it. That's what's ringing.
Is it done ringing?
Yes, it's done ringing. Okay. So the best way to reach me, well, actually, there's two ways. So annranson.com is all of my strategy and marketing work. But the work where I'm doing finding peace in everyday life, that includes the transformation game and all that more spiritual personal development, my website is called intentionswork.com. And my email is ann@intentionswork.com. And I have Facebook pages. I'm very active on Facebook, just Instagram and Twitter. It's like, I know it exists, but I haven't used it very
That's
much.
okay.
So probably
People can find you
Facebook,
on
if you
there
want to do
fast.
social connections, that's the best place to reach me.
Awesome. Great. We will put those links in the description of this YouTube video and in the description of this podcast episode so that people can find you more easily. Is there anything else you want to leave us with before we sign off? Last words of wisdom?
Well, I would just ask people to look up the transformation game. It is a board game, but it's really a spiritual and self-discovery tool, and it's something I'm trained in, and there are not many people in the US that are trained to facilitate this. And I think it's super, I mean, it's heavy duty, it's amazing, it's fun. So check it out. I mean, whether it's on my website or just in general, I think it's one of those really powerful, positive tools that's out there for us to use and to help us, navigate this crazy world.
Awesome. The transformation game. We will all look that up. Thank you so much for
Okay.
your time today, Ann, and thank you everyone for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of Tactical Magic, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Tactical Magic. To find out more, please visit our website, wildheartsriseup.com.